All right, back here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk. Like, share, and subscribe to Cova Sports TV. We have a special guest with us, Eddie. He's one of the very best in the country when it comes to covering all kinds of sports, whether it be tennis, golf, the Olympics, which he just got back from, as he was there covering that for the Washington Post. And he does college football, too. He is the one and only guy who cut his teeth here in the 757 from his days at the Suffolk News Herald and Suffolk Sun of the Virginia Pilot, the one and only Chuck Culpepper. Chuck, good to see you. You've been a world traveler more than my colleague Ed Young, who's gone up and down the East Coast this summer. You've been in different countries. You've gone to weddings. You've covered the Olympics, and you probably don't get much sleep these days.
I don't know if it's good sleep, but it's enough sleep, I think. Yeah. I've been wandering around all summer, and I'm at JFK Airport right now, and I'm getting ready to go to Las Vegas for the USC LSU on Sunday. Not bad.
Not bad. I want to ask you about that. You see my co-host is wearing Notre Dame, so he's going to ask you about the Fighting Irish, I'm sure, and their former coach, Brian Kelly, who leads the Tigers against the now Caleb Williams-less Trojans, coached by Lincoln Riley, in a very fascinating matchup on Sunday. But I want to go to the Olympics. You were there. Just tell me the experience to be at the Olympics. I know you've covered other Olympics in the past, but this year, the Olympics there in Paris, everything that you covered, what kind of was most fascinating to you? We had some wonderful basketball games to finish up on the men's and women's side with USA bringing home gold. But even more than the basketball, I think the sports like track and field and other things that are not your mega sports that get the attention really shine in this type of setting. How about for you?
I think maybe the most interesting thing about it is that they took the most beautiful city in the world. We could argue about that, but that's what I say. But and they mingled the Olympics with that city. In other words, there wasn't a complex outside of town where most things occurred. There were things that occurred outside of town, but the heart of it was right in there with their famous buildings and monuments and architecture and mingled right there with it. And I think that had an effect on both television and in-person viewers that was very powerful. I think it brought back to light one of the oldest elements of human life is that we all like to observe beauty. We like to look at beauty, and there you were watching these sporting events with backdrop being, Invalides, Napoleon's tomb, or the Grand Palais or the Eiffel Tower. And it was powerful in a way that I didn't expect, even as I did expect that it would be a good Olympics, but it was a great one. And that's what I think separated it.
Good deal. And before I let Ed jump in here now, I also have to ask you, because I saw you put up a picture on X or Twitter about the astonishing capabilities of the waiters in Paris, France. How about just some of the food places you checked out and things outside of the sporting, just the whole experience away from your coverage standpoint for you? What it was like?
They got this deal, those waiters, where they pick up like a whole bunch of chairs at the same time, and because a lot of the seating out there for restaurants is outdoor. That's part of the life there. It's part of you're supposed to watch life go by and sit at your cafe with your wine, and and that's part of the essence. So there's a lot of chairs outside, and when they pick them up and bring them in, they have this sort of athletic feat that I don't understand. The one guy will have a ton of them on his back, and I caught that guy there, and I showed him the picture, and he liked it so much that he had me text it to him. But that's right there on a boulevard whose name I never can pronounce. I can spell it, but it's one of the centers of sort of early evening and late night human life where you can just sit and watch people go by for hours and hours. It's glorious.
Yeah. Ed, you can never do that if you tried 100 times.
I have trouble with one chair, and that's absolutely amazing how they would do it. And Chuck, I was going to ask you, first of all, congrats on coming on, and I appreciate when I heard Suffolk Sun brought back memories.
Oh, me too. Wow.
And anybody. And to start at the Suffolk Sun, Suffolk News Herald, and now look what Chuck is doing is amazing. And your work is fantastic, Chuck.
Thank you so much.
When you out there in France for the Olympics, a couple of things. On the personal side, what was your favorite dish? Because I'm not real big in French food, but I love the French atmosphere. Probably will never be in Paris. And number one. Number two, though, what was the best event for you to cover, the one you look forward to the most or caught your eye the most when you were there?
I would say, as far as food, it's not my very favorite cuisine either, even though it's my favorite city. So yeah, it's a funny dynamic there, but they do. And this came up in that movie that had Meryl Streep in it, where she played Julia Child living in Paris. But they do incredible things with fish. So I had a couple of fish. I don't know if it's the rich in butter or whatever it is, but that's what stands out the most, I think, from this particular time. And then as far as events go, I think what maybe struck me the most is the Algerian boxer with the big controversy going on about gender, and certainly it was one of the big things talked about at the Olympics. But my job in that case was to go to Algerians. Many of them live in France. It's the largest diaspora in France, and of course, it's France once took it back in a certain point of history. So that's the background of that. But I didn't really know how strongly Algerians would support her, given that she was controversial and was kind of an outlier in ways, and they just, to talk to them about it was very powerful, because I was there the night they had the boxing at Roland Garros, and she was in the semifinals, and they got behind her in a way that was, it really struck me as very powerful and very emotional, and it told us a lot about sort of the meaning of being a nation set against when maybe you see that people from other nations are attacking one of your own.
Yeah, really good stuff there. Chuck, let's dive into college football now, because it's here. It was here last week with the game in Ireland that saw Georgia Tech upset Florida State. And there was not a lot of marquee games last week. You had Nevada almost as a 4-touchdown dog beat SMU, and you had some scares the last couple of nights with an NC State game against Western Carolina, and in Colorado with Deion Sanders, who remains a big story nationally, against North Dakota State. They eked it out. But just the whole landscape right now. We know about NIL and the transfer portal. And the big thing that I want to hit on, and Ed can probably follow up here, is the playoff now with 12 teams. And we've seen this on our level in a statewide with high school sports in our state, where they've expanded playoffs. Years ago, you were 8-2, 9-1, you wouldn't make it in the playoffs. In college football, you lose that first game, you're done. What's your feeling on the playoff? Do you like it, the 12-team format? Does it diminish some of the regular season? Does it put more spotlight on it? What's your feeling on how this is going to change just the whole feel of the sport as we begin things with a lot of marquee matchups today, with that, of course, high noon showdown Eastern with Georgia, Clemson, and of course the one you're seeing tomorrow with LSU, USC, among others?
I find the 12 to be just right. I think I would have found the 8 to be just right also, which is kind of, you can't say both of them are just right, I guess, but the 12, I do like that idea of those first 4 games that will feed into the next games. I think it's just right for determining a champion. I do wonder about how many games these teams are going to play, and whether, the wear and tear is going to be considerable. I know it's going to be considerable. How much is it going to weigh on the season? Are we going to get to January 20th now? January 20th, when the final game will be in Atlanta, and what's going to be left? And how much is it going to be an issue that somebody got hurt along the way? So I worry about it in that regard. While at the same time thinking, that is, as far as determining you remember when we used to vote on who would be champion for years and decades. We used to vote, and this, people always thought, well, the game's being ruined for this and that reason, because it's not the same as it used to be. Well, it used to be that people would vote, and I was just thinking with Notre Dame playing Texas A&M, that back in 93, 94, when they had that controversial vote at the end, Notre Dame or Florida State, and Notre Dame was playing Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl at that time. And so this matchup for tonight brought me sort of back to that memory of how things were when Notre Dame had just beaten Florida State like a couple weeks before in this monster game that we had. And then, Notre Dame lost to Boston College right after that. So we docked the voters docked them and gave Florida State the national championship that year. Now with this playoff, I think we lose sight of the fact that we don't have that junk anymore. And we had that junk for decades and decades. So I think it's moved in the right direction. 4 was better than a vote. And 4 was better than 2, which is what we used to have, one BCS title game. And then before that, a vote. And now 12, I think, is better than 4, although I worry about the wear and tear.
And Ed, you're happy because it means your Irish can lose 3 or 4 games and still be alive.
We're not losing 4 games. A game or two. I'm a little nervous about tonight, Chuck. Let's start right there. Notre Dame, a lot of hype going into Texas, College Station with Texas A&M, who's not getting a whole lot of hype.
Right.
I feel, and I think on my picks, I took A&M in the points. Am I crazy? Am I trying to wish the Irish to win it?
Oh, you mean by taking A&M in the points?
By taking A&M, right?
You can. It's like I know this feeling where you can win either way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is what I've been known to do.
He's on to you, Ed. He's figured you out real quickly.
Yeah.
It takes long.
But Chuck has done it too. See, I can tell Chuck has done it too with his.
I've done it too. I've done it. I don't bet, but I've done it in predicting. Predicting things. Yeah, you'll feel better, even though if you. But I do think, boy, this is interesting, isn't it? With this is where the transfer portal actually brings some interesting things to the sport, where you have this quarterback from Duke on one side who's transferred to Notre Dame, and this coach from Duke on the other side who's moved to Texas A&M. And what I think about in those circumstances is how closely I always would love to be in the film rooms. I'd love to see like what little tiny traits they're noticing in people that might help them make strategy. So you figure if you coached a guy at quarterback, now you're against him, maybe you know a few things that are really, really intricate. I don't know if that's true, but I've always been fascinated by what must be going on in there. So that's, to me, one reason that this game is quite compelling. And, Notre Dame in that secondary is fantastic. So I think Notre Dame also with its veteran presence, good experience there to handle that crowd at Texas A&M I think they're going to be able to do that. I don't know if they'll win, but I think they're going to be able to I do think they're going to win, and I do expect them to handle the crowd pretty well.
There you go, Ed. Good start for the Irish, Chuck says. And you look at the schedule, there's a couple of games that could be tricky, but you never know. You guys could just rise up to the top 5 by, say, mid-October.
Well, and my other point is that is and you guys kind of alluded to it a few seconds ago, Chuck, in the past, if you lost early, first game or two, it could be deadly for you for the playoffs.
Yeah.
But if you were going to lose, it would be better to lose early than to lose that one game late.
Yes.
I think with the 12, it takes that away for the most part because some of the slots are already going to be given by certain champions and whatever, leagues and whatever. I still feel you're going to see an abundance of SEC teams and probably or Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be the feeling that any at-large berths and the way they set it up was like that those in the know are figuring, well, we're going to have to get number 4 from the SEC. We can't give number 2 from the AC in there. Your feelings about that?
Well, I think that's right. And I do think one thing the committee, I think the committees have been terrific. I really do. And I know that's not what you hear normally, but I think the best thing about them has been they've done something that used to frustrate me even when I was a child, how people didn't take into consideration very much whom you had played, the schedule strength. It seemed like, just your record, if it was spotless, then you got consideration for the national championship. That was long ago. Now, I think the committee, even when I'm trying to think of, there's a year, the Ohio State, Michigan, 2 years back, Michigan wins the game. It's their game, which is always, of course, the last game of the regular season, but Ohio State still gets included in the playoff over body of work and whom it had beaten. So I think that idea of a slip up in the season costing you dramatically. Another one I can think of is TCU some years ago. That might have been the same year, yeah, when they lost the Big 12 title game, but still got into the playoff and then all the way to the final. So I think that idea of the slip up costing you dramatically is diminished somewhat, and but I still think it leaves room for this sport to have the best regular season among sports, which it always has for that reason, because all the game, each game in the chain matters so much. But I still think there's room for that, even within this new construct of maybe letting in a 2 or maybe even a 3-loss team that wins a conference into this 12-team group.
A few minutes with the fine columnist for the Washington Post, Chuck Culpepper. Read his work online, WashingtonPost.com. Go pick yourself a paper up as well here on Cova Sports TV at 757 Saturday Sports Talk. Like and share. Plus, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on Facebook, IG, Twitter, or X as they call it, all over the web as well. Chuck, two-layered question for you, sort of a two-part here. The first one is, and you're in the business of storytelling. So as you go to Las Vegas for LSU, USC, a matchup we don't see very often, very compelling in a lot of ways. I mentioned earlier, no Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley trying to get over the hump. He didn't quite do it at Oklahoma. He was close. LSU, Brian Kelly, this is a big year for him coming from Notre Dame. Which to you is the bigger story, win or lose? And I know this is what you think about this going in and as you write your column after a game. LSU win, LSU loss, USC win, USC loss, and then to follow that up, aside from the playoff, aside from the off-the-field stuff, NIL transfer portal, what about teams, players? You know, Michigan's got a new head coach now. Harbaugh's not there anymore. Alabama's got a new head coach. Saban's not there anymore. What are some of the storylines you'll be following most closely as we go from August into September and then October?
Well, I believe LSU winning and USC losing would be the loudest story. One thing I think that doesn't get talked about enough is how really, really good Brian Kelly is. Some of the other stories about like how he's gone from one place to another, often in controversial ways, gets more attention a lot of times. But I remember I called up his first quarterback way back from I believe his Central Michigan days, and just talking about, he said, I expect him to succeed at every stage he enters because of how extremely detailed he is. And that, I think if LSU were to win this game, it would kind of set them on a path to be, considered way up there even with the tough SEC schedule, for playoff consideration already. And, I think the sport's often really colorful when they're really good. So that's part of it. And then if USC were to lose, it would kind of be noisy there too, with how it's gotten over the last few years and how those honeymoons, as we used to call them, have gotten shorter. And I love the element in this game of two quarterbacks both replacing Heisman Trophy winners. Caleb Williams off to the Bears, Jaden Daniels off to the Commanders, and I believe both these backup quarterbacks won their bowl games last year in impressive fashion. So that gave momentum going into this. So I'm really excited about the matchup in that way. And as far as which I think we're all just going to look at Alabama all season. We're going to just look at what's happening there. And it's almost as if like topography itself got changed in Tuscaloosa with who's not going to be standing over there on the sideline, throwing down headphones once in a while. I'm not saying he did it often, but ranting on occasion, and look over there with that worried look. And we're not going to see that anymore. And I think I'm going in 2 weeks to their game at Wisconsin. And I think Kalen DeBoer had, no matter what they pay you, a lot of guts to take that job, and a lot of confidence, a lot of, very appealing confidence to take that job. So I think that's where even though Harbaugh left and Moore is at Michigan, and of course they've got Texas next week in Ann Arbor. That's another early season colossus. But I think we're all going to be looking even more so at Alabama during the season to see what happens there.
Yeah, I'll miss Nick Saban on the sidelines. I know he's doing TV
Yep.
work now for ESPN, but throwing headsets and going crazy and snapping at reporters. It's kind of like my co-host here, Ed Young, who was a high school basketball coach for 30, 40 years, and he won 500 games, and he used to snap at referees and throw things at reporters like me, and now he's not coaching anymore. So I'm worried, Chuck. I'm very, very worried, Ed.
They always look out of place when they're not coaching anymore.
They do. Yeah, they start wearing Notre Dame jerseys, and they're all over the place.
Yeah.
But Chuck, I make the point, though, I'm just retired as a teacher, but not a coach, and I'm just a free agent waiting for the right deal. That's where that is. And the only thing I would ever throw at anybody would be at that guy as much as possible because he can get under your skin. I would not do it to the kiddies because it's high school.
Right.
And sometimes I have to let the referee know they're not on their game.
Right.
But he did coach at Quinnipiac as an assistant, Chuck. I'll have to tell you when we have more time. And well, actually, you're getting ready for your flight. You have time real quick to tell the Jim Calhoun story when you went up against him at UConn to Chuck before you finish up with your last question.
Oh, wow.
Well,
go ahead.
I was assistant at Quinnipiac, Northeast Conference Division I. We're playing UConn at the Hartford Civic Center, jam-packed, probably, 12,000 people. It was every seat taken. We're winning. Little Quinnipiac, because our head coach was tremendous in scouting. We knew everything about our opponents. And we usually had an early lead when we'd play a Boston College, UConn, St. John, Syracuse. We'd have an early lead, and then the floodgates would open. We had an early lead on UConn. Jim Calhoun gets up. I think it was 6-0. Walks onto the floor. Tells the referee, give me a bleep, bleep, bleep timeout. Our guy had the ball, had to go around Calhoun. So we figured T. So our head coach is going ballistic because the referee blows a whistle and he says, timeout UConn. And our head coach loses it. And the referee says, technical. We thought, okay, he's going to give it to him. He gave it to our guy, our head coach, who lost it. We had to tackle him because we thought he was going to get thrown out. They proceeded to go on a 25-2 run. I think they had 4 guys that were pros. 2 of them were like first 5 picks. And I was sitting there to the assistant. I said, well, what the heck did Joe think was going to happen? We're not beating UConn at the Hartford Civic Center in front of all this. And he went in the locker room at the end of the game, destroyed the locker room because he was so mad at what happened. But you figure we were that guaranteed game. Remember, we get money, they get a guaranteed win.
Yeah. That tells you whose state it was, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was on the floor, and he should have had a tee. And I think he wanted one to kind of get fired up, but they didn't give it to him, and it was ridiculous. But I figured, okay, that's one of the masters at work. No wonder he gets what he can get. So we have that on there. Well, Chuck, when the thing I wanted to see too with college football, and you mentioned about with the 12-team playoff now, we take away people voting for number 1. We take away, and I kind of think 12 is good too because we get hype on top 10 lists. So 12 could be good. Now 13, 14, 15 are always going to complain, just like number 65, 66, 67 in basketball. Yeah. It's always going to happen. I think if you put every team in, somebody would still complain. Yeah. But I do think this is a way we can get it. It's going to be on terms, I think, how the matchups are going to happen. There's no reseeding. I think that's where the next controversy, complaints, screaming will come in terms of the matchups. Because nobody's really talking about that now because I don't even know if it's all figured out. Was it going to be this champion against this champion or whatever? But that's where I think the next problem is going to come from.
And, screaming is a big industry. You can't stop the screaming.
I try to tell this guy that when I'm screaming at him, he's in the pool scaring the kiddies and the ladies. Why are you screaming at me? Because you're going to get arrested or should get arrested.
Well, Chuck, always a pleasure having you on the program. We look forward to getting you on in the future. And again, if anybody has any questions in the future for Chuck Culpepper, you can always send it to us and we will pass it along to him, be it on the sport of college football or anything that he does. A lot of great column work on the tennis, the golf, the tennis. Man, no Djokovic, no Alcaraz in the U.S. Open now, both getting knocked out. Pretty interesting. And some of the other sports that he covers for the Washington Post. Go pick up a copy and read his work. Always a pleasure. Enjoy the time in Las Vegas. Safe travels, and I will talk to you down the road.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hey, Chuck, when you get a chance, when you cover Notre Dame, see if you can get me a jersey when nobody's.
You got one. You don't need another one.
It's a hockey jersey. I want a football.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
you
If
better keep
anybody
those
can
things-
do it, Chuck has that way about him, and they're not going to miss it. They got a million of them. And they got more money than Jesus.
Yeah,
so
you
he
want him to
doesn't-
get arrested and steal it. He wants to get you in trouble, Chuck. This is what I deal with. Yeah.
No, I don't want to get Chuck in trouble.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Chuck, have a good one. Thank you so much.
Have a
Thanks,
great
Chuck.
weekend. Thank you so much.
So one and only Chuck Culpepper, such a fine columnist. And did he drop on us? Did he drop a topography? That's a great word. He dropped a topography.